Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm Lee Camp. This is Eleanor Goldfield. How's everybody doing out there? Today, we will be talking about two different kinds of ceasefires. We will be talking about, is the ceasefire in Gaza a real thing? Is this really going to happen? And will we see a ceasefire in Los Angeles? No, actually, we won't be talking. We'll talk about the fires in Los Angeles. They're not going to cease, unfortunately. But
eventually.
at some point. But I'm
At some
talking about today.
No.
Yeah, unlikely. So
we gotta workshop that joke a bit more.
Oh no, I think it's ready to go. It is ready for prime time. All right, I'm gonna bring you a quick news rundown before we get deeper into the ceasefire story. There was a contentious confirmation hearing this week for Trump's pick for the Pentagon. Fox News host Pete Hegseth. Most of the contention
Does anyone else hear Hogshead when people say his name? Is it?
It'd be more appropriate.
I know.
So I'm fine with
I
Hogshead.
just hear that. Okay.
Pete Hogshead. Most of the contention was about a 2017 sexual assault allegations against him. Apparently, no one in Congress was similarly concerned as to Hegseth's excitement to continue the Pentagon's standard death, destruction, and torture. His lust for that, just par for the course. Not a problem. Moving on in the quick news segment here, David Lynch has died. The director, movie maker. He was the cinematic genius behind such films as Mulholland Drive and the TV show Twin Peaks. Unfortunately, everyone is trying to figure out what the hell his death means, and they'll have to go to some blog in the corner of the internet to get it explained to them. In response, you didn't get that joke because you don't understand David Lynch, but in response to the possible upcoming TikTok ban, hundreds of thousands of American TikTok users are migrating to another app called Red Note, which ironically is a Chinese app named after Chairman Mao's Little Red Book.
Is it really?
Yes.
That's great.
I believe if the U.S. government were a soccer team, we'd call this an own goal. But pretty incredible. Okay, but now we're going to do a little quick news on the ceasefire and then get deeper into it, or possible ceasefire.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna get into the specifics of this so-called ceasefire and what it would entail if Israel were to stick to it, which is doubtful. But first, let's just start with some updates. So since the ceasefire deal was announced as having been agreed upon, some things have gone down that you could definitely file under not surprising. So, for instance, Ben-Gvir has, he's a national security minister, has said that he would resign if the government ratifies the Gaza ceasefire and captive exchange deal. He's not the only one. Smotrich, the finance minister, has also said that he would resign and take the party with him, which would basically collapse the Israeli government. There was supposed to be a vote today on the ceasefire agreement. Now that vote has been pushed to tomorrow, with
Israel yet again claiming like, oh, Hamas did it,
which is of course
bullshit.
BS.
Yeah.
If anybody's messing things up, it's Israel by continuing to bomb places where they know there are hostages and then just blaming it on Hamas, because that's what they always do, right? So, and he has said that there needs to be a complete stop to Gaza aid. This is like basically including the little aid that does trickle in.
Also, let's mention that Israel has murdered 21 children since the ceasefire announcement.
Well, I have updated numbers on that too.
Yeah.
I think it's at least 80 people now that have been murdered since the ceasefire
and this is the 21
announced.
was children.
So basically now people are saying that Netanyahu is going to have a hard time keeping the government together because of this. There have also been protests basically.
That would be so sad if it didn't hold together.
I know. There have basically been protests on both sides of this deal. There have been people saying that the ceasefire deal is a good thing. There have been protests that blocked the road in Jerusalem, saying that they don't want a ceasefire because somehow that would kill more Israeli soldiers. Struggling to figure out how that bass-ackwards thinking works, but I'm not going to struggle to think too long on it because my brain might start leaking. So. There's people saying that the Israeli government has absolutely no incentive to see the ceasefire through, and we'll talk about the points that make up the ceasefire deal in a second. What else here? There are pictures and video of like hundreds and hundreds of aid trucks waiting to get in through the Rafah border. That's the border between Gaza and Egypt, because it was announced that that border was going to open first. As of right now, I don't know that it has. And I think that's it for the updates surrounding the ceasefire, and we can get into the points that make up the ceasefire.
Yeah, we're going to get into the details of the ceasefire. And some of you were mentioning Sam Husseini getting carried out of the White House press conference. We will be playing that video in a few minutes as well. And yeah, let's get into the details of this supposed ceasefire agreement. And, you know, we will talk in a few minutes as to whether anyone should believe anything Israel ever says. So to me, it's kind of like, yes, absolutely ceasefire. Absolutely stop killing everyone. Also, is there any reason to believe Israel will ever keep to this?
Well, right. And so the ceasefire deal that the points that I'm going to be sharing here are things that were agreed upon in Qatar, but again, they have not been ratified by the Israeli government. And even if and when they are, there's nothing to say that Israel would stick to them. The ceasefire deal includes 2 phases. The first phase, which would last 42 days, will include a complete halt of hostilities. I like how they call it hostilities.
I know.
Like hostile, someone's hostile if they cut you off in traffic. Would also include a gradual release of Israeli captives in Gaza in exchange for Palestinian captives in Israeli jails. Hamas will release 33 Israelis who were captured on October 7th, 2023. And it's not yet known who of these are alive. And as we've covered on the show before, both of us and Lee on his own, the IDF has killed a lot of their own hostages because of something called the Hannibal Directive. And so if hostages are dead, it's very likely the fault of the IDF.
And not even just, the Hannibal Directive, but also the indiscriminate bombing where they know they could be hitting hostages. They don't care.
So Israel will also be releasing hundreds of Palestinians, reaching potentially up to 1,000 prisoners and detainees. And that sounds like a lot, but keep in mind that there are tens of thousands of Palestinians that are held in detention, in prison, basically captives as hostages of the Israeli government.
Yeah, it's tough to know the exact number because many of them are kind of black bagged, like there's not reliable reporting on it, but it's definitely over 10,000 that are being held hostage by Israel.
The Israeli army will begin to withdraw its forces from the populated areas of the Gaza Strip on the first day of the ceasefire, which is slated to be Sunday. Supposedly, the return of displaced Palestinians to the north will begin on the 7th day of the ceasefire. This is starting to sound like some religious, and not on the 7th day. So the displaced who return on foot will be searched, but not those who return in vehicles. I'm not sure what that agreement is about. The deal also stipulates the entry of humanitarian aid in the first days of the ceasefire at a rate of 600 trucks a day. The aid that will enter in the first phase will include medical supplies and necessary material to rehab destroyed hospitals and bakeries. The WHO has estimated that it would take $10 billion to rebuild the hospitals in Gaza. $10 billion.
That's just the hospitals.
That's just the hospitals. Because if you think about it, and like think about a not a top of the line hospital, but a hospital, and all of the supplies and all of the like machinery that keeps that place running, all of that. Think about that times however many hospitals there were in Gaza, and 10 billion actually seems a bit like an undercount to me.
Yeah.
So negotiations over the details of the second phase will begin on the 16th day of the ceasefire. The second phase will see the release of remaining captives being held in Gaza, specifically Israeli army soldiers and officers, as well as the remaining bodies of killed captives. The phase will also include the beginning of reconstruction in Gaza. Israel will complete its withdrawal from the Gaza Strip in the second phase, maintaining only a military presence in a 700-meter strip along the fence line of the strip, aka the concentration camp. Israel will completely withdraw from the Rafah crossing point. Again, that's the crossing point between Egypt and Gaza, which you could ask, why the hell is Israel there in the first place? But you could ask that about everywhere.
Yeah.
U.S., Qatari, and Egyptian mediators gave guarantees to secure the completion of Israeli withdrawal. And the third phase will see negotiations for a permanent end of the war. So now, so there are basically like three phases here. And basically people are saying that if Israel agrees to anything, they'll only agree to the first part where they get their hostages back, and then they will go back to whatever they were doing. They will go back to the genocide. And there's precedent to this. There's not only precedent, but there's precedent to this right around an inauguration. This happened back in 2009. Israel withdrew from Gaza just as Obama was being inaugurated, and then ramped up their attacks afterwards. So this is a not uncommon practice for Israel. And so the question here is whether this is going to last at all. Now, of course, you have the UK has said, oh, we greatly, we really push Israel to ratify the ceasefire deal. But obviously they don't care that much. Otherwise they would have been pushing Israel towards this already back in May, because this is the same effing deal as The Intercept points out. This is the same deal that was already on the table in May. So these basically, they report it's nearly identical to an agreement that Biden announced in May that was drafted by Egypt and Qatar, which had been hosting negotiations with Hamas, just like they have been now.
But this is what it speaks to, is that Biden has never actually put any pressure on Israel to take these deals or actually stand by them or do any of it. Whereas Trump, and look, if you know anything about me, I will talk about what a heinous human being Trump is till the end of time. But Trump knows a lot about how to feed his ego, how to play the game, and he knows it looks good for him as a leader to say he got the ceasefire through on day one that Biden couldn't achieve. So, from the article I'm reading here, Trump immediately took credit for the epic ceasefire. One diplomat familiar with the negotiations reportedly went as far as to say that Trump's involvement was the first time there had been real pressure on the Israeli side to accept a deal. While Haaretz previously reported that Trump's Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, did play a pivotal role in forcing the Israeli government to accept the deal, Israeli analyst, I'm not going to try and say his name, argues the tiered agreement is all a ruse for the government to retrieve as many hostages as it can before attacking once more. Israeli media has also reported that Trump made several promises to the Israeli government, such as the only thing the U.S. has done against Israel during this entire thing is put sanctions on the settlers, on these land thieves a little bit. And Trump says he's going to take those off. So he's going to stop sanctioning the land thieves of Israel. And also, Trump has reportedly agreed to remove his. Sorry, I already said that part. He also said, this is the best part. He said he would support Israel retroactively if they violated the agreement. He told Israel, if you violate the agreement I'm pressuring you into right now, I will say I support you in that. What the hell kind of ceasefire is that?
It's not. And as the Intercept points out, history is littered with agreements that have not been implemented. And an expert pointed out that Israel has a pattern, not only of not implementing or sticking to these ceasefires, but also late hour bombing to empty its stockpiles in anticipation of larger military aid packages from the US. So basically, that this will continue. They're getting rid of a lot. I mean, 80 people have been killed just in the past like day and a half, have been murdered by Israel as they ramp up their bombings in Gaza. And so there's no reason to think that they would just, that this is the end, right? That they would just stop. Like, okay, well, I guess we're done with that. And, you know, go on their merry way and forget that that this is something that they've been doing. So I think that while the news is good, there's, first of all, we haven't even gotten to the point where Israel has agreed to this officially. And there's nothing to suggest that Israel would see this through, because they have all of the leverage, because they have the United States backing them. Even if Trump hadn't said that he would retroactively support them, the US will always support Israel because Israel is their colony in the Middle East.
But and let's assume that because Trump seems to want this for the moment, he's fine with Israel committing genocide. He just wants it to stop for a few days so he can look good. Let's say he does support this, and let's say they stop essentially bombing for a month or more, or whatever. The reason there's even this space for Trump to look like a peacemaker, for Trump to look like a powerful negotiator who on day one was able to stop the bombing, like the only reason that space even exists is because of how gut-wrenchingly pathetic Joe Biden and the Democrats and Tony Blinken are. Like, they have been so disgusting and so pathetic and shipped bombs every 36 hours to Israel to murder children that literally a bloodthirsty maniac like Trump can look like a noble negotiator who got it done on day one. Like, the fact that that space even exists for him, it shows you how pathetic the Democrats are and how they don't support peace and how they are genocidal maniacs. And I want to play this one clip that really speaks to what you were just saying about, like, this is not the end. Even if there's, let's say a ceasefire happens. Let's say it happens. This is Congressman Waltz from Florida, a psychopathic Republican from Florida. And here is...
Feels kind of redundant.
Doesn't it? And here's his stance.
And from your perspective, if this deal goes through and we enter what's characterized as the first phase, does that effectively mean the war is over? Does a ceasefire mean that its work is done in Gaza for the foreseeable future?
Well, I certainly think Hamas would like to believe that, but we've been clear that Gaza has to be fully demilitarized. Hamas has to be destroyed to the point that it cannot reconstitute, and that Israel has every right to fully protect itself. So, all of those pieces, all of those objectives are still very much in place. Look, I mean, October 7th was a terrible day. They put everybody in a terrible...
All right, then he gets into the standard rant about how awful October 7th was. But
just so you all know, the yellow ribbon that the douche canoe on the left is wearing is a Bring the Hostages Home ribbon.
They don't mean Palestinian hostages, I assume. They mean...
No,
Israelis.
oddly enough.
Okay.
Oddly enough.
But I like that they're saying, some of these lunatics, a lot of them are saying forthright, like they're not hiding it. We will have a ceasefire, and no, we will keep bombing, destroying, ethnically cleansing Gaza. That's what needs to happen. They're not saying, oh no, the ceasefire could mean the end of all quote unquote hostilities. They're saying, no, we'll keep doing it all.
Well, because you can always, it's like what the U.S. has done in the Middle East since the U.S. entered the Middle East, which is you can always create terrorists out of nothing. So as long as they have the Hamas boogeyman to point at, which is as long as there are Palestinians, even infants, they will always have the ability to say Hamas and bomb that area or send in tanks. So as long as there are Palestinians, the U.S. and its colony of Israel will have the ammo that they need. And just because I saw somebody point out here that we're Israel's colony, so there's a slight difference. If we tell Israel to stop, as evidenced by whatever went down with the ceasefire deal, I don't know, Trump, but I don't really care. But if and when we've talked about this on the show before too. I think I did this when you were in Tibet, but like the times that the U.S. has told Israel to stop and then Israel does, because Israel can't actually persist as a settler colonial entity without the U.S. The only reason that Israel's economy is still holding on is because the U.S. backs Israel's bonds. They should be worth absolute dick right now. They should be worthless because Israel's economy is tanking. But the only reason, and I talked about this with Matthew Ho on my on Project Censored, if you want to go check that out, projectcensored.org, and he said, Eleanor, it's as if you and Lee wanted to buy a house and Bill Gates was your co-signer. You could get any house you want. Now, this is basically what Israel has with their economy. They have the U.S. as their co-signer. So this is why they're still afloat. And that is a colonial relationship, right? Where the U.S. basically has control over Israel, and Israel is only able to persist as an entity because of the U.S. backing. So it's that kind of relationship. And I think it's important to point that out because it makes it clear where that hierarchy of power is. Now, does the U.S. have a totally twisted relationship in terms of doing whatever AIPAC wants them to do and the far right of Israel? Absolutely. Absolutely. But the U.S. does it for its own interests. That's the difference. Because the U.S. never does anything because they just want to be benevolent or something. Just like with the creation of Israel, the U.S. didn't back it because, we think Jews need a homeland. No, they didn't fucking care. If they cared, they would have allowed Jews in during the Holocaust in the Second World War. But they didn't. So it has nothing to do with loving Jews. The U.S. does not love Jews or anybody. There's no love in a colonialist state founded on genocide and slavery. So that doesn't enter into it. It's about their own interests. If Israel were to stop being useful for United States policy, you bet your ass they would walk away from Israel in a minute. So it's only because Israel is useful for U.S. hegemonic policy in that region that Israel is allowed to exist.
I want to read real quick the response by Afshin Ratanzi, a great journalist. I've had him on this show before. And anyway, he said this about if a ceasefire does happen. He says, billions of people will not forget the mask being ripped off the U.S.-led rules-based order, quote unquote, with all the lectures on human rights and international law being cast aside to pursue a systematic annihilation of some of the poorest people on earth, the Palestinians of Gaza. The horror of seeing dead, injured, and starving children, and the devastating parents holding the corpses of their children on our smartphone screens for over 15 months won't be forgotten. Neither will the videos of Israeli soldiers gleefully boasting about their war crimes and committing them on camera. The real meaning of the U.S.-led rules-based order may be submit or be annihilated, but the Palestinian people never stopped resisting the occupation.
Amen. And there's a lot of talk that I've seen with, organizing with, Palestinian youth movement and things like that I've been seeing that basically say like, this is only the beginning. Like, we have so much work to do. Again, even if Israel were to stick point by point to the ceasefire deal, which is very doubtful. And I think that there's a lot of work to be done. I was just talking with somebody about, the organizing around U.S. labor for ceasefire. Now that there has been a quote unquote ceasefire, instead of walking away from this issue, okay, then how do we go to the next step? Like, okay, U.S. labor for a just transition away from war and the climate chaos that is that is literally eating up LA County with flames. Like these fires are connected. The fires that are consuming my friends' homes in LA right now is very similar to the fire that is consuming Palestinian lives in Gaza. It is born from greed and colonialism's battering ram of capitalism. These are the same forces at work here. And the only way to get to a kind of liberated future, a kind of future where we have all of the things that we need, not just to survive, but to thrive, is to do away with these entities. And that requires building around these shared struggles, and also why labor is so important.
Yes, the shared struggles are incredibly important to always keep in the conversation. I also wanted to bring this point that is this from Prim Thakur, who writes for Intercept. I read a little of his stuff earlier in this, but he says, really, it would not have hurt Biden and Harris to have made this ceasefire happen earlier. He says domestically, poll after poll and mass protests nationwide showed widespread support for conditioning or ending U.S. aid to Israel in order to end the violence. A YouGov poll released Wednesday showed that 29% of 2024 voters who didn't vote for Harris but did vote for Biden, so a large percent, almost a third,
that's a lot,
of those who did not vote for Harris but voted for Biden, said U.S. support for Israel's genocidal war was the top reason they did not vote for Harris. Biden's own ambassador to Israel admitted, perhaps unwittingly, that Biden's allyship with Israel contributed to making his challenge for re-election insurmountable.
Yeah, that poll was pretty interesting, and I saw a lot of people sharing it. It's one of those things like, yeah, file this under no shit. But
yep.
I mean, now you have numbers to prove that. It's
yeah, and I think a lot of these people knew that Trump would not be better for Palestinians. Trump is not going to turn Israel down and say, hey, behave yourself. But a lot of people just stayed home from voting, that voted for Biden the first time around, because they realized I get genocide either way. I'm not voting for either of these genocidal maniacs. But a lot of those people were Biden voters and would have been Harris voters.
Well, and that's the thing. This is kind of like the issue with Nader in 2000. A lot of people, because we are raised in this kind of binary two-party system, it's actually one party thinking. We think, oh, well, if you didn't vote for Gore, you must have voted for Bush. Or so if you didn't vote for Harris, you must have voted for Trump. Actually, some people just said, I'm not engaging in this at all. And so I'm just going to stay home. So and of course, the Nader thing was like, oh, well, he pulled votes away from Gore. But in reality, the people who voted for Nader in 2000, much like people who voted for Jill Stein or a socialist in this election, are either people who weren't going to vote Democrat anyway, but also there were some registered Republicans, and of course the largest group, independents, who also voted third party. So it's just that a third party, I'm not going to get into this because it's going to take, but basically
we've been through it before.
I know, but basically the bottom line is that why vote for a Republican when there's already one running was the question. And so people were just like, oh, 2 Republicans are running, I'm just going to stay home.
Yeah. Is this a good time to play 2 of the awesome people standing up and making Blinken look like a goddamn tool?
I mean, he does that pretty well on his own.
I know he does. In 2 separate speeches, Antony Blinken was interrupted, both having to do with his support for genocide. And we all know that Biden is not really making any decisions. So much of this has been Blinken doing this.
We strengthened America's robust sanctions regime on Iran and delivered on President Biden's commitment.
You will forever be known as Bloody Blinken, Secretary of Genocide. You have the blood of hundreds of thousands of innocent people on your hands. We have spent.
Thank you. I respect your views. Please allow me to share mine. Thank you.
Appeal to your humanity. In front of your house, we bring you letters.
He doesn't actually respect reviews. I'm gonna skip ahead because it does go on for just
That's awesome
it
that
gets-
she just keeps
because
going.
no one's able to take her out of there.
Where was this?
I don't know where the speech was.
So to continue. At the same time, we strengthen America's robust sanctions regime on Iran.
He just goes back into it as if it didn't happen.
Well, of course, because he's a total robot. Like these people have no soul.
I know.
I think that
yeah, it
was
doesn't
amazing.
Doesn't say where it was. Wouldn't surprise me if that was Code Pink.
Here, there's because I feel like a lot of times that I know like that people have disrupted and I've disrupted. You think you're going to be taken out of there so soon that you only have like 2 sentences planned and you keep like saying them to yourself while you're sitting there like
Yeah.
but like here's evidence to show that you should have like a paragraph planned because if they can't get you out
If they
easily
can't get
you
you
got
out,
some time.
You can keep going. I actually did a good job of realizing the reverse when I was going to be on Fox News. Most of you know this, but it was way back 2008. And I was going to be on, and my plan, which ended up happening, was to basically, rather than do what they wanted, to just call them a parade of propaganda at a festival of ignorance. And that's what I did. But the smartest thing I did was at first I started planning this like longer, but it probably would have only been 1 minute. But 1 minute on TV time is forever. And then I realized like, oh, they're gonna let me talk for about 12 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And so I planned like 20 seconds. And sure enough,
we gotta cut to commercial.
I went for about 12 seconds and he was like, okay, we gotta go. We got a thing. Yeah. Anyway, so it was the reverse, but yeah, it does happen where they don't get you out. Okay. So here is our friend Sam Husseini, who was just today dragged out of Blinken's final press conference. Before we don't have good video of this, but before this happens, Max Blumenthal, who he created the Gray Zone and everything, he stood up and questioned Blinken on the ICJ and in Israel.
Well, he specifically asked about the journalists who have been murdered by Israel and how Blinken talks about a free press and all this shit. And then Max says something like, "Why did you allow my friends to be massacred?" And he was removed, but he was not like forcibly carried out.
They did the casual removal with Max. It was kind of it was the escort. It was the okay. This is a little different. So this is Sam Husseini, another great journalist. I had him on not long ago.
And we've shared Sam Husseini videos before, and my thing has always been, how does he stay so calm?
Asking questions.
And I feel like that's the case here too.
He stays pretty calm, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. But
anyway, let's show the video.
Get your hands off me. Answer a damn question.
I look forward to answering.
So we did see another video where it starts before this, and apparently they started removing him just because they realized he was going to ask tough questions. Because the first loud thing you hear is him saying, "Get your hands off me." So
right, well, because he did ask a question during Blinken talking, but then their response is so because it's basically like you just ask a question during someone's speech and then they just proceed to do this.
Get your hands off me. Answer a damn question.
I look forward to answering questions in a few minutes.
You know about Israel's nuclear weapons. Everybody from the ICJ. I was sitting here quietly, and now I'm being manhandled by 2 or 3 people. You pontificate about a free press. You pontificate about a free press. You are hurting me. You are hurting me. You are hurting me. I am asking questions after being told by Matt Miller that he will not answer my questions, and so I'm asking questions. Wasn't the point of the May 31st statement to block the ICJ orders? You blocked the ICJ orders.
Please respect the process.
Oh, respect the process. Respect the process. Well, everybody from Amnesty International, to the ICJ, saying that Israel is doing genocide and extermination, and you're telling me to respect the process. Criminal! Why aren't you in the Hague? Why aren't you in the Hague? Why aren't you in the Hague?
And I just like to say that all of those people just sitting there filming and
all those journalists
like accepting what's happening are Cowards.
Extreme cowards.
Like
They're worried about their
100%.
they're worried about their jobs, their careers. They're not willing to ask real questions. And if they do, like Sam was saying, they're not accepted in mainstream media,
Right.
which he has been largely forced out of mainstream media mostly.
So by the way, this is like the Defending Rights and Dissent, and I know some folks who work there, Chip Gibbons being one of them, has pointed out that this is like not surprising considering the Biden administration's antipathy against journalists, but that arresting an accredited reporter at a briefing would be a new low. Because imagine, and also, I just like to point out, everyone, this is the Biden administration, okay? So just in case anybody's like, oh my God, press freedom under Trump. No.
Yeah.
Okay? So this is like, imagine that this is the new, that this would be the new thing. That anytime somebody asks difficult questions, like, how dare you talk about a rules-based order when you go against the highest courts in the world?
Whoa.
What are you doing?
Go on. It was auto playing something.
Imagine every time somebody asks a difficult question like that, they're dragged out of a press briefing. Like,
I know, and it's so
What?
the level of hypocrisy is hilarious. Like, this is the U.S. who claims like, China doesn't have freedom of press, or Iran doesn't, or Russia doesn't, and meanwhile you've got to get a pass to even get in front of these people, and then when you do, if you ask a question they don't like, or a question they don't like at the wrong time, they're gonna have security forces with guns drag you out of the goddamn press briefing. It really just, again, reveals the United States for what the fuck it is. Yeah. Alexa Prohl says the entire room is complicit.
yes,
They're all part of it.
absolutely.
And this was 2 journalists in one press briefing, both taken out of the room.
Both forcibly removed
Yeah.
for asking questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you have more on Israel? I have something else on
Go ahead.
related. There's been a great research done by Declassified. Yeah, Declassified. Did research into the BBC's output during this genocide, and they said our research into BBC's written outputs since October 2023 finds the corporation has mainly not reported at all on all the major ways the UK government has been working with Israel, facilitating genocide. It found that the BBC has reported just 4 times in 15 months that the Royal Air Force has been conducting surveillance flights over
Wow.
Gaza. 4 times in 15 months. Only one BBC report on the subject has been written since December 2023, despite the fact that hundreds of such spy missions have been conducted almost daily in aid of Israeli intelligence so that they can ethnically cleanse more effectively. The Ministry of Defense says these flights are solely to aid the rescue of hostages. Right. Only one BBC online report mentions the UK may be providing targeting information to Israel or flying weapons to the country. None of the articles otherwise raise concerns about the UK being willing to collaborate militarily with Israel at a time it is devastating Gaza.
Well, let's not forget the UK is responsible for creating Israel. So,
And so this is the BBC.
Will Frankenstein kill his own monster?
Yeah. This is the BBC and how willingly they will cover up the connection between the UK and this genocide. Yeah. So, and you won't hear that on the mainstream media, like the other mainstream media, not BBC, reporting on what the BBC's up to. Well, yeah.
Right. Well, and I do have so this is just something interesting that I found perusing on the Middle East Monitor, for instance, shows that a report by the Israel Central Bureau of Statistics at the beginning of 2025 shows that reverse immigration of Jews has been occurring since October 7th, 2023. A full 82,000 people have left. And this goes
likely not to come back.
This is what I was talking about earlier with, you know, that Israel's economy is collapsing, you know, businesses have closed. A lot of these this corroborates the data from that experts in the fields of technology, economics, medicine, and culture are fleeing from the state. So basically, the people who make up an economy in a lot of ways, especially tech, like Israel had put a lot of stock into being, you know, this big tech center, and that's falling apart.
Yep.
And this, again, in my interview with Matthew Ho, he talks about this, how when he was in, when he visited, and he spent a lot of time in the West Bank, but also Jerusalem.
Recently visited.
Yeah, like November. And he said, like late November, and he said that it's like a ghost town. Like shops are closed. You know, he said he went to the Temple Mount and it was empty. And they're usually like regularly, there are like thousands of people there. And so it's absolutely falling apart. And who's keeping it afloat is, again, as I said,
U.S. money.
Yeah, you and I, at the same time that people in LA have lost everything, get a one-time check of $700. The U.S. is keeping Israel's economy afloat so that it can perpetuate genocide.
Yay.
But hey, let's keep acting like things aren't connected.
Okay, before we get to our other cease the fires discussion, was that better this time around? Was that a better episode?
That hurts my ears.
Real quick, everybody, a couple of quick notes. Eleanor is the co-host of Project Censored. They do amazing work over there. You should listen to the podcast whenever you get a chance. Also, I have new stuff up at leecamp.net, my locals page, patreon.com/leecamp. That's how you support the show. And I have just put up my mini documentary, my 20-minute video on my time in Tibet. I was there for 3 weeks.
It's really good.
Did a lot of crazy stuff, and you can watch that.
As a tree.
I dressed as a tree. You can you can watch that for free now. It's not behind a paywall. It's up on my YouTube channel. You might be watching this on the YouTube channel. Just click the videos tab and you'll find it right there. My video in Tibet, and I'd love for you to share it with the world if you like it. Love for you to get it out there, and hopefully I can do more like that if you guys support it. But anyway, thank you. Urban Survival says Tibet video was great. There you go. That's all we need. 1 vote of confidence. Did it. But let's keep going.
Are we moving on to LA now?
Yeah, we're moving to fires.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's, do you have this map?
I did put it somewhere, I believe.
There. So Cal Fire.
For those of you who think I've covered all this, we have talked about the fires. I've talked about the fires on this show, but this is stuff I have not talked much about. So.
Well, so I wanted to start off with a quick rundown of like the confluence of issues here.
40,000 acres burned. Jesus.
Yeah. Again, like I don't understand these numbers.
I
don't get it. So this is one of those moments where like, hey, a lot of things are true, right? And so the first thing is that we have to understand that according to CAL FIRE, back in 2021, 2.7 million people in California lived in what were zoned as very high fire hazard areas. And experts, I spoke to an expert who will be on next week's Project Censored show over at projectcensored.org. And she was saying that there's no like safe place from fires in California, not by the water, as evidenced by what happened in Palisades in Malibu, not in the high mountain areas, obviously not in forested areas. So the question is, how do we better construct for the reality of fires as opposed to, hey, let's just empty out California, because that's not realistic, right? And so a big issue here is how we construct homes. And I'm not going to get into like the nitty gritty right now. You can zoom in a little bit. I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty right now because you can hear more about that on the episode that airs this coming Monday. But basically, the fires are we oftentimes think of, especially if you've ever been to LA and you've seen like the areas with a lot of brush, because LA is essentially a desert. So there's a lot of like dry grasses and things like that. And people think of that and they're like, oh, that's what's causing these fires. No, this is human infrastructure. Human infrastructure is literally the fuels for these fires. And so that means that the way that we have constructed our living spaces, our communities, is actually fueling the destruction of our communities. It's poetic in a way, isn't it? So this means that there is a way to combat this if we start thinking like, if we start thinking about how fire is fueled by our human infrastructure and how we can address that. And also,
can I just throw in here? It's human infrastructure combined with like these 100-mile-an-hour winds, etc. Like,
well, sure, but when I'm talking about fuel, you're like, yes, the winds obviously don't help, and they're the ones that get the embers thrown from a place like Palisades to Altadena. Absolutely, but the issue is that Palisades, that can burn even if the winds aren't 100 miles an hour or whatever, because this moves from house to house and these houses are crammed together. There's no space in between them to really dig trenches and to stop these fires from moving along. The way that we construct our communities is a fire hazard in a tinderbox. So that's an important thing to note. And of course, climate chaos, duh. But it's important to recognize that there's a confluence of issues here. And there's also the issue, and I know that you've talked about this before, but there's the issue of how we view our response to these fires. And part of that, unfortunately, involves, or like up to 30% of that involves slave labor. And I wanted to bring up.
So I have mentioned the slave labor in previous live streams, but we're going to get more into it now.
So this is a piece by the Marshall Project that was released on the 11th.
Penny Marshall.
Who?
Nothing.
You can't keep doing things that I don't understand. References
It was
that I don't
a joke,
understand.
but why don't you understand that one? She's been famous for like 60 years.
I don't know who Penny Marshall is.
All right. Anyway,
Who's Penny Marshall?
Laverne and Shirley, but then she became
Laverne and Shirley?
But then she also became a famous director. Anyway,
Who's named Laverne?
Shirley's friend. Shirley she is.
I honestly don't know if you're messing with me right now.
You've never heard of Laverne and Shirley?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Shalmeasel, Shamazel, Santa Dub Incorporated. Oh my God.
What? What's happening?
Now I have to look it up because this is happening now. We all need to do this together now.
What in the blue fuck is happening, Lee?
This is
I
happening.
don't know if I consent to this.
Wait.
Slamazo, Houses Up Incorporated.
We're gonna do it. Give us any chance, we'll take it. Read us any rule, we'll break it. We're gonna make our dreams come true. Doing it our way. Nothing's gonna turn us back now. Straight ahead and on the track now. We're gonna make our dreams come true. Doing it our way.
Can people please screenshot Eleanor's face? Because oh my God. See, Eleanor grew up in kind of a time capsule where she like lived in a cave for like 13 years in a Swedish forest. And then it's a bizarre, like to the point where we've mentioned this before, like as of 5 years ago, I mentioned the Mario Brothers and she said the what? And it's you never know what is going to have passed by.
It's not an age thing. I see a lot of people saying I'm too young. Thank you, I moisturized, but that's not it. I just didn't. I wasn't allowed to watch TV when I was a kid.
No True Flag says it's called television.
Yeah, I gathered, but yeah, no, I was. Also, people in Sweden have heard of the Mario Brothers. Okay, when you brought this up to my cousin, they laughed at me. So it's really just my family.
Yeah, that's true. No, literally in Sweden today, because I was there a year and a half ago, There are magazines like on the equivalent of the 7-Eleven. There's magazines with Mario on the cover of the goddamn magazine in the 7-Elevens.
I told
So
you, it's not Sweden's fault, okay?
Urban Survival wants to know if there's a cave in Charlotte.
I mean, Charlotte is a bit of a cave. But
People are concerned you were sheltered from U.S. sitcoms.
yeah, thankfully. Yeah, okay. I'm not sorry that I missed that. I was like, okay, well, I have so many questions, but none of them are important. Anyway,
Should I play the rest of the theme song? Do you
please
want
don't. Please don't. Okay. So getting back, where the fuck was I, Lee? God.
Well, you were the one who dug in. When I make a joke you don't get, you should go ha ha and keep going, and then we don't have to do this.
No, because I want to know.
Let's go
I
back.
want to know what I'm
Let's
missing.
let's go back to the Penny Marshall Project.
Okay. So what did that have to do with the Laverne and Shirley?
Did you not see across the street it said Penny Marshall?
Oh, that's one of the actors.
Oh my God.
Okay.
Oh. If anyone's looking to be a co-host on a show,
Okay, just so everyone knows, how old am I? 38. Okay? I forget because it's not important for me to
someone
remember.
just wrote you were 19. But
That's very cute. Again, I moisturized. But yeah, no, I'm 38, so it's not an age thing, okay?
Can we get back to the Penny
Yes,
Marshall
we
Project?
can get. If you call it the Penny Marshall Project one more time, I will flick you in the nuts. I swear to God. Okay? Oh, the Marshall Project. The Marshall Project is a project about criminal justice. Okay?
I took a bet as to whether I could get you to angrily yell the Marshall Project, and I won. The Marshall Project.
Okay. So, again, they released this article on the 11th, so last week, and they pointed out that more than 900, so almost 1,000 incarcerated firefighters are now responding to the fires in Southern California, according to the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. They're considered by the firefighters to be an essential part of the state's response. Generally, they work on hand crews, which is what it sounds like, using hand tools to clear vegetation and create fire breaks. So this is like back-breaking manual labor.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough job. And there was this video I saw the other day of one of them who he still worked with them, but they'd taken him off the front lines of this stuff because he had gotten so injured he had to learn how to like walk again. Like he didn't detail how it happened, but doing this work.
And I see some people noting children as well. Yes, there are what they call juveniles, children basically that are included in these numbers of people fighting the fires. Now, here's the thing. There's nuance to this issue. So is it absolutely effed up that the U.S. still has slave labor? Yes. Is it absolutely effed up that we throw prisoners at giant fire tornadoes? Absolutely. And also, here's speaking from the prisoners themselves. The Marshall Project says firefighting is voluntary in the sense that they are offered to fight fires in exchange for a decrease in their sentence. And it is in comparison, now this tells you a lot about U.S. prisons. In comparison to the violent confines of prisons, it is preferable. So imagine it being preferable to do grueling manual labor, essentially in an oven, huffing like flames of, asbestos, that being preferable to sitting in prison.
It really is a gun to your head situation.
Yes.
It is it's basically, and they get time off their sentence.
Yes.
So it's, do you want to be in a prison rather than out in the fields? And do you want to be in a prison longer than you would have been if you went out in the fields? And almost definitely a lot of these people are going to say, yes, I want to be out in the fields. But that is a gun to your head. It's really like sticking a gun to someone's head and saying, fight that fire. And then the person going, well, it's better than having the gun to my head, better than being shot. Well,
Right.
Does that mean they love it? Does that mean it's awesome? Like,
And the other thing is that, I mean, and this again shows what a twisted paradigm we have in this country with regards to prisoners. One former prisoner, David Desmond, wrote in an essay in 2023 for the Marshall Project, quote, "Sometimes we would stay at a fire for 2 or 3 weeks, and when we left, people would hold up thank you signs. People would bring pastries, sodas, or sandwiches. No one treated us like inmates. We were firefighters." So this is a way for them to be treated like human beings.
Yeah.
How many people, how many of us wouldn't do this kind of work after years of being dehumanized to the point that we are like lesser than, like rats? How many people wouldn't want to be celebrated as human beings for doing something good? And this is, again, this like shows how fakaked our paradigm is, because if we treated people who had, made some mistakes, like, I don't know, beat somebody up, I don't consider selling weed.
Had a joint in your pocket.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't consider that a mistake. Okay. So I'm talking about like actual people who have done violent things. If we didn't treat them like they weren't humans anymore, then people wouldn't be willing to trade for, this kind of horrific work just to be treated like a human being. And that's, I mean, it's layers of psychological torture and dehumanization.
And to the people, because the argument is, whenever you bring up the slave labor in California, people will give the argument like, look it up, man. A lot of them really enjoy doing that work. And it's like, yeah, by comparison. And they're getting paid $1 an hour, which compared to the 13 cents an hour, which is like the average, is amazing. So they're getting paid better, but they're not getting paid minimum wage. They're not getting paid like they're regular human beings. So it's like, yeah, they may enjoy the work as compared to being in a cell, but this is similar to like, okay, there were different jobs on the plantation for slaves. So I'm sure some that were the worst jobs and some that were the slightly easier jobs. And the people on the easier jobs go, oh man, I love that one. Does that mean they don't want to be slaves? I mean, or they do want to be slaves? Like, of course not. Of course there shouldn't be slavery, because you got an interview with one of them saying, I like this job better than that job. It doesn't mean great, system, awesome.
And this is the other thing that's messed up, that although it's basically slave labor, although they call it involuntary servitude, which I just love like the euphemisms for this. Involuntary servitude. I'm sorry, slavery is just a shorter, it's one word, 3 syllables. Let's just stick with that. So people, inmates working as slaves can make between $5 and $10 a day fighting fires, which and up to $26 over a 24-hour shift. Here's the kicker. It is the best paying prison labor available
by far,
which is one reason it's so sought after.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing, because the for-profit prison system has monetized everything in prison in order to pay for basic needs, like whether that be, sanitary items or things like that. You have to pay for it. How do you get the money to pay for that? Oh, well, you do involuntary servitude.
No voluntary servitude.
Yeah, right. So again, it's like these layers of things. Like, so if you're sitting in prison, you're treated like shit. You might be sitting in solitary. You might be getting the shit kicked out of you by prison guards or things like that. And they come say, hey, we need firefighters. You'll get paid better than any other job that's available to you, and you'll get time off your sentence. What do you say? I think most of us would say yes, but that doesn't mean that it's consensual. That doesn't mean that it's like you're applying for a job. Like, yeah, I'd love to do this if I had any other choice.
Yeah.
It is not a choice. So couching it in they love to do this, or oh, they're so proud to be helpful, it's bullshit. It's a non-starter argument, because it completely takes away the lived realities of these people who are being pushed into this decision that is not really a choice.
Yeah.
And and then, of course, the other issue on top of it is a lot of these people, once they get out, they say, hey, I've got firefighter experience, but oh, you have a criminal record, which means that most places won't take you as a firefighter.
And by the way, California just voted to keep this practice going.
Yes.
California had it as a ballot initiative, I guess, as to whether to end this form of slave labor, and they voted to keep it going. Which really means that the propaganda to vote for it was good enough. Enough money was poured in to say this is a wonderful thing. Prison labor is wonderful, even though they get barely paid at all. The amount of money dumped into the campaign got enough people to vote to keep it going. So,
yeah, and the other point that they say, this Amika Moda was a firefighter in 2015 as an incarcerated person, and she said that the other issue is that they often relied on heavily used equipment that was not appropriate, hand-me-down goggles that no longer sealed properly and things like that. And they wouldn't complain because they were afraid of getting put back in jail, which means that they are more susceptible to long-term health effects. And she said, every single firefighter that's out there right now, I'm sure they're proud to be there, she said, but also every single one of those people has signed away their rights. And they're putting themselves on the front line without understanding the health impacts long-term. And do you think, so firefighters who are part of an engine company or something like that, they have health benefits, right? Yeah. Do you think that the prisoners do? And so that when they get cancer, lung cancer or whatever in 5 years from breathing in asbestos flames, do you think that the state's going to come and be like, hey, let me get that for you?
And the other thing that the interview I saw with one of them, who said he'd been injured and he needed to be taught to walk again. The injury was so severe. He was asked whether he'd been warned of the risks going in, that he could end up paralyzed or have severe injuries or burned. And he said, no, there was no training on what could happen to us. And she asked again, she was like, really? They didn't tell you anything of the risks? And he's like, no. So that's the difference between working in a regular fire department and working in prison labor.
So again, there's nuance to this, but at the end of the day, there shouldn't be slave labor. I feel like we can all agree with that. So it's really disgusting that this is the situation, and it just speaks to the prioritization of a prison state, a police state. Again, the LAPD got their budget bolstered while the LA Fire Department got theirs cut. And that's not to say that the 17 million, which is basically 2% of their operating costs, and that's to say that that would have saved the day. But it's indicative, right? It's indicative of a paradigm and a pattern of behavior that prioritizes a police state and a prison state above the health and well-being of people and communities.
All right, folks, we're going to wrap up, but I have a live stream tomorrow, a members-only live stream. I'll be breaking down the just really important and life-changing interview between Elon Musk and Joe Rogan.
I don't know how you watch.
It's not easy. It's not easy.
Is that better than Laverne and Shirley?
No, I'd say Laverne and Shirley is much better. In fact, right now, what we're going to do is we're going to watch a 24-hour marathon of Laverne and Shirley.
We are not.
Then next week,
Eleanor, that's the royal we.
Eleanor is going to explain everything she's learned about life from Laverne and Shirley and the Penny Marshall Project.
I told you I'd flick it. I said that again.
But so I hope you'll join me tomorrow for the members-only episode. I will also be going over something about Biden's farewell speech, which was just epic. All of that's at leecamp.net, patreon.com/leecamp. That's how to support this show. It's just $6 a month, which is 38 cents an episode. I feel like that's worth it. And the Tibet video is now available for free on YouTube. You should watch it right now. You should go watch it right now. And check out all of Eleanor's work at artkillingapathy.com.
It's great to see everyone again.
Yeah.
Glad to be back.
See you later. Keep fighting.
Well, brother, I salute you, though, man. You're one of the few that bring together this tremendous artistic talent and still be in such deep solidarity with oppressed people.
It's an honor to be here because I'll tell you, Lee, you have one of the funniest shows on television, bar none.
It's an enormous pleasure to be here. While I was waiting, I was leafing through your wonderful book.
The same to you. I love your show. Be happy to come back anytime.
Lee, this is one of the great honors of my long career, just to be in the same earth with you.
I'm sure.
We're just so blinded. We have so many blinders on because our society doesn't want us to know things. And so it takes shows like your show, and
it is clearly designed to eradicate.
Hey, good to see you.
Hey, Jill, how are you? Julian, thanks for joining me. Honor to have you, brother.
Consumerism is a theory that people should behave this way to help each other. It's not.
Mr. George Galloway, thank you so much for joining me in these dark times.
Always a pleasure, my friend.
Thank you so much, Lee, for having me on. Keep fighting. Haha.